unleashing female power.
Being a disruptor.
I'm always constantly telling the truth.
I love
Art. That's all her life.
She's alive and female.
Being a woman, what it meant.
Prove him wrong.
Girls run the world.
We're rocking the place.
Welcome to the Art Pod. I'm your host, Carolina, and I'll be your guide through this Pandora's box. Strap yourselves in for a journey through the art world where we bring you candid conversations, untold stories, uncover industry secrets, and celebrate the women who are shaping its future. Because in the Art Pod, the spotlight is always on the girls. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Art Pod. My guest today is Sarah Prickett, and she is currently the exhibitions manager at Pace Gallery. Welcome.
Thank you. So great to be here.
So I want to read a little bit about Sarah before we get started so that everybody knows who she is and what she does. So Sarah is an exhibition manager at Pace Gallery in New York, following previous roles there as an exhibition coordinator and gallery assistant. She has interned at the Peabody Essex Museum, Wadsworth Atheneum, and Brooklyn Museum, among others. She graduated from Wesleyan University with a BA in studio art and a minor in art history with a concentration in South Asian studies. In addition to pursuing art, Sarah is wild about the outdoors and is an avid backpacker and hiker. In her free time, she also enjoys drawing, sewing, and caring for many houseplants. I want to get started before anything about art. I also love hiking.
Amazing.
What are some of your favorite trails? Do you go upstate?
I'm trying to learn more about what's available upstate. I don't have a car, so I have to get really creative. But last summer, I went up to Harriman for the first time and did an overnight there, and it was beautiful. I'm from the Northeast, so most of my experience has been up in New Hampshire in the White Mountains, which are so stunning. And then I love to travel whenever I get to. I was in Utah 2 weekends ago in
nice.
Moab, hiking around there. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I love hiking too. I have a dog and he loves hiking, so I try to go upstate as much as possible. We already know like some of the trails.
We'll have to chat then.
Yes. Offline. Okay, so I wanted kind of to start with asking you, maybe you can explain a little bit to the audience about what a exhibitions manager does at a commercial gallery, kind of like what projects you're working on now that you're excited about. Take us through like your day to day.
Sure. So I will say at first that exhibition manager may look a little different at Pace Gallery, which is a very big company, versus like a smaller or mid-sized gallery. So just speaking to my role at Pace, the primary function is project management of exhibitions. There are so many things that go into an exhibition, everything from the pre-planning, figuring out the timeline of how things are getting to the gallery in New York, where they're coming from, budgets.
Oh, yes.
And how to stick to them, and kind of rolling with any unexpected issues that may come up, all the way through to staying in touch with the whole team, making sure everything's running smoothly and trying to problem solve as things come up, and all the way through the execution, installing and opening the show, and then very important, the de-install and getting everything safely to where its next destination is. So primarily project management. Some of what I get most excited about are the opportunities to work with the artists. Mm-hmm. At Pace, the main kind of artist contacts are the salespeople. So getting to work with those teams and sometimes even the artists themselves to realize their show. And sometimes I've gotten to work with artists on things that they're working through to get the show up, whether it's an art fabrication question or just looking for advice or a second opinion, which is a really amazing thing to be able to do. I have made art kind of in my own personal life, so getting to work with an artist as an artist as well is like one of the most rewarding things I get to do, but mostly project management.
Nice. And how often would you say you start planning ahead for an exhibition?
Sure. So it's actually a really good time to ask that question. My team has just confirmed our 2025 exhibition schedule. So I'm kind of in maybe three states of mind right now. Okay. I've got a show opening next week that I'm working on and a show opening the following week. So we've got the kind of things that are like in motion physically, like here, the artist is on site, all the way through to I'm going to start talking with salespeople about their shows in 2025 and starting to gather that information so we can start putting together budgets and timelines. So it's very real and then also very like kind of theoretical.
Oh, I can imagine. And so normally when these shows are organized, do you work with the salespeople or like curators? Do you bring in like other people who might be curating the show that you also work with?
It really depends on the show. I'd say most of the time it's with the salespeople, because they're the ones who are working with their artists. The way that PACE is structured is we have about, let's say 10 dealers, and they each have their own kind of roster of artists within the gallery that the gallery represents. And so they're the ones kind of keeping tabs day to day on how their artists are doing, what they're working on. And so they're really in tune with their artists. And so they kind of function as unofficial curators as well, especially also if the artist is alive, they'll probably have a strong hand in how their show will look. But we also have a team of curators in-house, which I think is a growing trend. A lot of curators are coming into commercial galleries as opposed to museums to work. And then we will also sometimes have external people come in and curate.
So for those who might not be familiar with kind of how an exhibition starts or goes start to finish, could you maybe talk us through either a project you just opened or one that is opening and kind of let us know how does it start? Do you first meet with the sales team and go, okay, this is this project, this one's coming up in 4 months, or like how do you structure your time to make sure that, or better yet, how do you start working on a project? Like what's the first step for you?
Sure. So I kind of receive a proposal to start for a project. The head of my department is the one who's fielding proposals from salespeople, kind of very long lead. What are artists thinking about? What shows do they need in the coming year? And then I'll kind of receive that proposal, which has very like initial details outlined. And what we're trying to do is meet with the dealers as soon as the year ahead has been booked. So this is a year to a year and a half before the show actually opens. It's very far in advance. Everything could change, but it's just kind of to establish the team that'll be working on the show and what we might be expecting, at least as far as we can tell at this stage. So I think there's kind of two starting points. There's this very long lead, year to a year and a half meeting that happens with the understanding that everything could change, or they might not know very much to begin with, but people always know more than they think they do. And so when you actually sit down to talk and kind of go through some of the questions that we have, some things start to like percolate. So there's that very long lead meeting, and then probably about 4 to 6 months in advance, depending on, we try and have 6-month lead meetings given if an artist is international, because there'll be some kind of shipping time that will need to be buffered in, or a more complicated, maybe institutional like show, like a museum type show where we're doing a lot of scholarship. We're having just a massive number of works. There's really a variety between a show that might be like a Brooklyn-based artist who is showing 12 paintings that you just hang on the wall versus a show that might look like a museum show where there's labels, there's specific lighting or furniture. We might have like a vitrine. So depending on kind of what we know about the show, if it seems like it's going to be pretty straightforward, we can wait a little bit. But if it's complicated, we'll try and get ahead of it.
So for shows, do you always, you said that you might work with like an estate if the, artist is no longer with us, but do you ever do exhibitions where you also get loans, or it's mostly just like works that are for sale and that's it?
We do have shows with loans. And that's when our excellent registration team comes into play. They're so amazing at what they do. And if it's a state that PACE represents or works closely with, it can be pretty smooth. If it's getting museum loans, we usually have to contact them at least like 6 to 8 months in advance.
Oh,
so that's when we really have to be on top of things. But yes, occasionally we'll have loan shows.
Okay, great. Yeah, I noticed there's so many, especially like larger galleries like PACE put on fantastic museum quality shows like recently, and it's really nice to see, because galleries are now really ramping up the the level of the shows.
Yeah, they're like blockbuster shows that go up for 6 weeks and then you say goodbye and on to the next. So it's really, really fast paced. And, but I think that's what's really rewarding too, is that there is kind of it's almost like putting on a theatrical show. Like there is something to see at the end, which is really rewarding.
Yeah, and I'm sure those are the types of shows where you have a lot of moving parts and have to really be on top of the project management.
Yes, yeah, try to be.
Are there any shows that you worked on in the past or are open currently or that are upcoming that you're super excited about?
Yes, one show that'll be opening May 9th is by an artist named Team Lab. They're a collective based in Japan, and this is their first show in New York in 10 years. And they're known for their immersive digital installations.
Oh, great.
The show at Pace will be an interactive projection piece that's going to be on kind of a freestanding, it's going to be 30 feet long, so huge artwork. They definitely reference like Japanese screens, so they have kind of like this gold, like it's digital, but what looks like kind of gold leaf motifs, and visitors will be able to interact with it. So
when does that open? That sounds fun.
Yeah, it's going to be very dramatic. It's a completely black box room with this huge, like luminous piece. So I'm excited to see it come to fruition.
And when does it open to the public?
May 9th.
May 9th.
The opening. So
okay.
May 10th onward will be.
Okay, great. Well, I have to go see it. It sounds exciting.
And that's a show that we've been working on since. It feels like a year. Because it was going to be a blockbuster show given Team Lab's kind of the duration of time between their last show. So it's really exciting to see it finally.
And how long is it going to be out for?
It's going to run through the summer. So through, I believe, August 16th.
Okay,
so plenty
great.
of time. And it will change month to month. So if you decide to go back, again, it will look different than it was the first time you saw it.
So it's forever changing.
Yes.
Okay, nice. So I also wanted to talk a little bit about your kind of progression at Pace because, you've been with them for, I think, 5 years, is that right?
Yes.
And you've held various roles and you started as a gallery assistant. So can you walk us a little bit through first how you got the job at Pace as a gallery assistant, kind of what your responsibilities were as a gallery assistant, and then how you kept moving forward in the ranks, as they say?
Sure, yeah. So I will say, after graduating from undergrad, I really wanted to move to New York, but wasn't sure how to get a job in the arts. So I took a job in international event planning. So something completely unrelated, but it was actually very helpful because it pushed me to realize this was what I really wanted to do and to go back into the industry. So I will admit I had not really realized that art galleries and auction houses and kind of the more commercial side of art was it's a whole industry that you can work in. I think I obviously knew that they existed, but I was very unfamiliar. And so what I started doing was I would, on my days off, just go around Chelsea, see shows, and starting to get kind of like a familiarity with what was out there.
And there's a ton out there in Chelsea.
A ton. You can never cover it all.
Yeah.
I started applying. I think it helped that I had previously interned in art institutions, mostly museums.
Yeah, and we'll get into that when we backtrack a little bit.
Yeah. But it is a bit of a grind, I will say. I think I applied to Pace for 3 different positions between like a summer and March when I finally got the job that I started as. But I think what helped was the day I interviewed for the gallery assistant position, which was my first interview at Pace, there was a exhibition opening at Pace that evening, and so I stuck around and went to the opening and actually saw one of my interviewers at the front desk and just complimented them on the show and said it was great to see it in action. And I think making kind of a personal connection, if you can, really helps get your kind of foot in the door, because I don't believe I had any professional connections at Pace, and so that it feels very daunting to try and apply.
Yeah,
it's very competitive if you don't have someone that you can ask to kind of put their neck out for you. But the gallery assistant role is like quite the experience. The main function is you are sitting at the front desk, you're public facing, greeting visitors, answering any questions about what a show might be at the given time, which was one of my favorite things, was interacting with the public and getting to speak about the shows. So it requires you to be very knowledgeable about what's showing, the artist, kind of prepared to field any questions that may come up. It's also a role where you have to be good with faces. Coming through the doors at any given time are clients, institutional professionals, kind of heads of museums or curators. And so that was one of the more daunting
I can imagine.
parts of the job, just being able to recognize people, or at least you kind of have to be prepared for anyone to walk in the door, even if you don't know exactly who they are. I mean, of course, treating everyone with courtesy and enthusiasm, but just you never really know who someone might be. But it's a great kind of like boot camp into the industry. Pace is quite a big company, so it requires you to know kind of who everyone is. And so I think to this day that has served me so well, just having kind of a working knowledge of who's who and who they represent. The dealers, when you are working the phones, you're directing callers to their points of contact at Pace. So if a client is calling, you have to be really, you have to make sure that you ask them who they work with, or you look them up in our system and make sure that they make it to their contact. So a really good introduction to the company, who's who. They also encourage you to work with different departments. So especially if you're not sure yet what you want to do, so like before you start to specialize, a great part of the role is you get to work on projects for different departments and kind of try on different roles. So I remember I worked with our research and archives department, sifting through archival materials and cataloging things. I worked a little bit in sales. So it's a great opportunity also to kind of try on different hats. And also you find yourself in really just unique situations as well.
I can imagine.
You're also an assistant, so if any errands need to be run, sometimes you're called upon to do those. I remember there was an artist who was visiting the gallery, and she was going straight from the gallery to the airport to fly to South Africa, and she realized she absolutely needed this one brand of probiotics before she flew. And so I remember I looked at every health store in Chelsea looking for this one medicine, and I had to ask if she would be okay with a different brand. Yeah. But you find yourself in kind of course, like really funny situations as well.
So I have to say, because there's this like almost stereotype of the gallery girl where like you walk into a gallery and no one like looks at you, and you know it's very cold and intimidating for people to like walk into a gallery. But the way you're describing it sounds obviously completely opposite. Like you loved interacting with the general public and, you know, fielding questions. Do you feel that role is sort of changing now than it was before, where it was kind of just like, you know, somebody at the front desk, just like whatever? Right.
I mean, there's definitely the stereotype that they don't give you the time of day.
Yeah.
I think it's both a change and also kind of how I, not to say like I am this like high-minded person, but just I think it really is real. Like I think it's crazy that I studied art and really wanted to be in the industry, but I just didn't really understand galleries, and I think part of that's the intimidation factor. So feeling like kind of breaking that stereotype was important, but definitely we were taught to, we were even given like an EQ like book to read, and as part of like the gallery assistant training, and just to be approachable and warm. I think I hope it's a change that will continue going forward.
Same. So how long were you in the gallery assistant position before you moved on to your next position, and kind of how did your promotion come about?
So I was in the role for about 1.5 years, and I think part of that was COVID.
Okay.
I was in the role for I think about 6 months when COVID, maybe a little more, but around the time. I think the gallery assistant role is a great training role, but it does kind of start to, I think people like to move on after about a year. But yeah, I was in the role for 1.5 years, and I do commend Pace for being able to retain its front of house staff despite the gallery and public facing roles being, we were unable to greet visitors because we shut down.
Right.
But we were still, we had the gallery phone like routed to people's cell phones while they were quarantining and things like that. So I was able to kind of do a lot of my job, even though we were not physically there. But about my promotion, I had been, again, feeling like I was ready to try something new and doing a lot of projects for other departments. And one that I was very interested in was art fairs and exhibitions, which is kind of linked at PACE as one department. And before COVID happened, I remember a colleague had a going away party. And so I went because I'd worked with that colleague, and I approached Marley Hammer, who was formerly the director of art fairs at PACE, and just got to chatting with her and expressed my interest in learning more about art fairs, and I just asked if there was anything that she needed help with. And so I feel very thankful she remembered that conversation and kept in touch, and so we were starting to talk about what projects might be available, and then we shut down. But I was still able to do a lot of work for her because I think in a really interesting way, we were able to see like the art world go online.
Yes.
I think the art world is a little bit archaic. It's slower to adopt kind of the newest platforms and tech.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of reasons why we don't rely on the internet, because I think there's absolutely nothing that compares to seeing art in person. You can't like appreciate it as much online. And just,
I completely agree. I had that same conversation with somebody literally on Friday.
Oh, yeah.
We just talked about that, and you know how art should always be experienced in person. There's only so much that a picture of an artwork will do, and it's like art invokes feelings and, you know, emotions, memories, all these things, and it's different when you're face to face with it in person. And, you know, like even its size, you know, has a direct impact on how you perceive it, and that's hard to get from a photo.
Absolutely. And so I think kind of desperate times called for new methods. So
Yes.
That's all to say art fairs continued, but just online. And
Yeah.
so there was a lot of work to be done in getting information, photos, platforms set up online, which I could help with from home. So I ended up doing a lot of work for the art fairs team still as a gallery assistant. And then when an opportunity came up in August of 2020, PACE kind of formalized its first like official exhibitions team. There had been plenty of people who were working on exhibitions prior to this, but we did not have kind of an exhibitions department. So when this department was being formed, and the head of the department, James Sadek, was interested in introducing kind of the project management role as a new kind of role at the gallery, the opportunity to add more people arose. So I think I was kind of in the right place at the right time, luckily, and was able to join kind of as one of the kind of founding members of this new department in a coordinator, but essentially project management role.
Did you work on art fairs initially and then exhibitions, or were you working on them simultaneously?
So I was helping out with art fairs kind of administrative work. Okay. But the role that I eventually moved into was in exhibitions.
Okay.
I unfortunately didn't get to try traveling to art fairs. Yeah. But maybe someday.
Yeah. No, art fairs are, I feel like, a completely different ball game than exhibitions. Yeah. I feel like they're very quick, but you also know a lot of shipping logistics and things like that. So it's a lot of project management, I feel like, but for a very small, quick time frame.
Absolutely. And you're shipping hundreds of works for 3 days.
Exactly.
It's a pretty wild thing. Yeah. But we now have a full-on art fairs team, and they do amazing work. So, yeah.
So then how did you progress from, you said exhibitions coordinator, right, to exhibitions manager?
So I was in the coordinator role, I think, for about a year. And again, since exhibitions had already been happening before this team was created, there was a lot of kind of infrastructure already like people had been planning exhibitions before, so it was a good way to ease myself into the project management role where I was taking on more of the responsibility in organizing the show, but was able to kind of like learn through what other people had been doing in the past as a coordinator. And then I think just with time and more experience, I was taking on more independent of a role. I didn't need to be as kind of like as guided as much. So just worked my way up to manager. And there are two of us in New York, myself and a colleague who split the New York shows 50-50. And then we have managers at all our, our satellite locations around the US and around the world.
Do you work closely also with the other teams, or are you just kind of more focused on the New York branch?
Mostly focused on the New York branch, though we do get to work with our other colleagues. For example, the other show that I'm working on that's opening soon, Wang Dodin, she's a French-Vietnamese artist, and her primary representation is with our office in Geneva. So in all of the planning, we are working with the Geneva team to organize the show, and then they'll be flying here to New York on Monday to start installs. So I don't work on shows that will be traveling to another place, but anyone who's coming to New York, we can work with them.
And when does that show open?
May 2nd.
Okay.
So
you
soon.
have, a lot of things going on.
Yeah.
Okay, fair. So let's track to the very beginning. Can you walk us a little bit through your studies at Wesleyan? Did you know that you wanted to do art right away? Did you go on a different major? How did kind of your academic career in the arts begin?
Sure. I knew that I wanted to study art, and that was one of the reasons I went to that school. They've got a really beautiful gallery space, Silka Gallery, with huge ceilings and beautiful natural light. So major attraction to the school. But I knew I wanted to study art and art history. So kind of no surprises during the course of my studies there. But I really wanted to show my work as a senior. We do kind of a senior thesis show at the end of the term. And I studied art history as well, and concentrated on South Asian studies, which there's a really great program for South Asian studies as well at Wesleyan. So the region of India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, that area of the world. So yeah, but I didn't really know yet what I was going to do post-graduation. I think I knew for sure that being a fine artist full-time probably wasn't for me. As much as I loved it, I think it takes a really special, like, driven type of a person who's like, this is the thing that I've always wanted to do, and I can't see myself doing anything else, which I admire so much. To be a full-time artist, it takes a lot. So that wasn't for me, but I knew that there was this whole world of supporting working artists or supporting scholarship of artists no longer living, and so I knew I wanted to continue that post-grad, and it was a process of trying to figure out what that would be. I think I cycled through a couple different ideas. I remember for a little while I was considering conservation, which is kind of the repair of artworks, keeping them in stable condition, and so kind of at the very last minute, my second semester of my senior year, I took Intro to Chemistry because it's a highly scientific field as well as art kind of heavy field. And that was such a funny experience being with all these kind of freshmen studying to be doctors. But yeah, I think as I was graduating, I really had a big question mark of what could I do with this? Because I know a lot of colleagues who pursued a master's degree after their undergraduate studies, or then went on to pursue a PhD. And I think I was just ready to work. Yeah. I was really eager to get out of school. And so it was a process figuring out where to go from there.
Yeah, I remember when I was in school, I was so fascinated with conservation also. And then my school, I went to Fordham, they offered a chemistry class that you had to take. And I was like, I can't do this because I suck at chem.
Yeah, it's really hard.
Yeah.
And also, I think if you do make it all the way to being a conservator, I mean, what a high stakes job.
Yes.
You are working with often priceless, I mean, if you're in a museum setting, you're working with priceless art, and you're either removing layers of varnish or things that might have decayed to apply new or repairing, and so we're working directly on the art, and that's very stressful.
I remember there was this article that came out, and this was like years ago. There was a conservator working on a really old panel of Jesus Christ, I think from like the Middle Ages, and the conservation job they did was literally so bad it eventually became a meme. I don't know.
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
You know which one I'm talking
It's
about.
so painful to see.
I was like, how did you go from point A to this?
I don't know.
Yeah, it was crazy. And then like that's your legacy now as a conservator. I'm pretty sure they will never work again.
Yeah, I don't think they would be hired again. No.
So yeah, you're right. It's very high stakes. So now that you've graduated your program, did Wesleyan offer any sort of professional development or any sort of ways for you to get internships after you graduated? What was your first internship out of school?
So I interned after graduation back at the Peabody Essex Museum in Salem, Massachusetts. I had interned there before, so I think that helped kind of get a foot in the door, but I would say yes and no. I think it was helpful to go back and learn what I did during that time, but I was really eager to work and was kind of realizing that I would be an intern forever if I didn't get more schooling. So when I was getting ready, like kind of figuring things out my last year of school, I was talking with a lot of professors, and one professor told me, again, this kind of advice that floats around, like, if you can see yourself doing anything else, do it.
Yeah.
And specifically in regards to working in a museum or being a PhD in art history. And it's like, oh, that's really
Did that discourage you?
Advice.
Yeah.
I had another really wonderful professor who taught art history of South Asia, and he asked me if I wanted to go in the academic route, so teaching, because then you get to kind of continue your studies of the topic, but you also get to work and work with students, which I also think it's a very difficult job.
Yes.
So, but that would also require much more schooling as well. So, I'd say I did have the resources of these other kind of professionals or scholars around me to ask for advice, but I think there wasn't really a clear, oh, you should try this, or you sound like a really good fit for this, or but they were able to put me in touch with a lot of people in the field. So I think an education in itself was getting coffee with probably a dozen people. I think feeling very lucky to have that network through my college. Just you can reach out and say, I'm a graduate of the same school as you, and I'm really interested in this field. Do you have 20 minutes to hop on a phone call or to get coffee? And I think that was really, really helpful. I remember I met with a couple of people who had just gotten their PhDs and were looking for fellowships. And one woman was saying that, again, you really have to want this, because she was being considered for something in Oklahoma, something in California. You really just follow wherever the opportunities that you land are. And she said, I'm so thankful my partner is a teacher and can kind of be wherever I am. So there was a lot of kind of like humbling experiences and advice out there, which made it quite intimidating, but super thankful. I think I would not be here if I did not have that advice.
Yeah.
So I'm really thankful for people who do pick up the phone and are willing to talk with someone who's just starting out.
Yeah, I mean, I work with a lot of curators and obviously PhDs and academics in my field because I work on the publications at the museum that I work for. And I swear it's like every time I email them, they're like either at a different university or they're doing a fellowship here or there. And you really have to be willing to relocate and really move with where the job is or the fellowship is that you're doing.
And they also vary from 6 months to 2 years.
Yeah.
I mean, you could be doing the exact same thing in 5 months or
Yeah.
while you're on the job. So you're applying to something new. So
Yeah. And Magazino, we have a scholar in residence once a year, and that's a little under a year. I think it ends up being like around 8 months. So we have these like fellows coming and going who are obviously, PhDs in academics, and it's, then they go somewhere else or they come from somewhere else. So yeah, it's, sometimes, like you said, it's 6 months. Sometimes it could be 2 years. You never know where you might be or end up, which is also nice if you really like traveling and moving around. So I feel like that's something for those types of people.
Right. Definitely. I think there's also something that I know less about, but there's also kind of independent curators.
Yes.
So people who are called on to projects and kind of have this repertoire of things that they've done, but they don't have kind of a full-time association with a museum or a university. So I think that's also really interesting, and didn't realize that
Yes.
was the case until I kind of was in this world.
Yeah, I mean, I know a couple of independent curators, and then I know full-time curators for like museums. And the independent curators always tell me that it's really great because they get to work on so many varied projects at so many different institutions, but there's also the, risk of not maybe having the project that you want to work on come to fruition. Maybe a museum saying, no, we don't want to do this anymore. So, there's like that job level of insecurity with being an independent curator as opposed to somebody who works, full-time in-house.
Right.
But there's pros and cons to everything.
Definitely. And what you want to get out of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. So, can you tell me a little bit about, so you were at the, I see that you were the studio art summer intern in the education department and summer intern in the conservation department at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. You were a winter intern in the conservation department for the Arts Reference Library at the Frick. You were also a research intern in the curatorial department of Asian art at the Brooklyn Museum. So all those are in very different locations. Are you originally from New York or?
I'm from Massachusetts.
Okay. Yes, you mentioned that early on.
About an hour north of Boston.
Yeah.
So that made it accessible to be kind of living with my parents and working at either the Peabody Essex Museum or the MFA in Boston. But the art world, like the center of the art world is New York. So that's really where, as a young person, you really want to be because there's just so much opportunity and also things to see and to learn. So I did, on my winter break, one term work at the Frick.
Did you travel back and forth? I assume not. You were in New York, right?
No. My mother's from New York City, so
Okay.
We have some family here, so I was able to stay with them. But I think that's a real question is how do you access these internships? I think things are slowly changing where there's more paid opportunities, but there's still a lot of internships out there where they either don't pay or they cover your meal,
right,
or your subway fare,
Yeah.
and that's really not accessible to most people.
Yep.
So I do feel really lucky that I was able to do what I did, but there's a lot that still needs to happen to make sure everyone can access these opportunities.
Right. I mean, I know personally for myself, if I wasn't living in New York with, my parents at the time when I first started my art career, I don't think there would be any way for me to actually end up doing what I did if I didn't have that opportunity. Because living in New York City, especially now with, everything being insanely expensive is we limit our accessibility for the types of people we can get into the field.
Right. And so much missed opportunity.
Exactly.
So I'm hopeful now that they're starting to pay for interns. I mean, it's probably not very much, but something to get you by while you're here.
Yeah. I mean, all of my internships in the beginning were unpaid. And now obviously, just based on Magazine, we pay for our interns. I know other institutions that I've seen on NIFA also, now when they do the internship positions, they're also paid obviously not a lot, but maybe it's slowly moving in the right direction.
Definitely. And I think there's this kind of, I think they do help, both with experience, figuring out if this is something that you want to do, but also it's something that for you to talk about when you do end up applying for jobs, to talk about what you did and who you met. And so I think they are still helpful.
Yes.
So, yeah.
In regards to your internships, when you were doing these different types of work, was there any one of them that was like, you know what, this is kind of the direction that I want to go in? Or did you ever feel like, you know what, this isn't for me, but I'm glad that I tried it?
Yeah, I think the education internship was amazing. It's basically working with the students who come to the MFA Boston for summer classes. So I was working with children aged 5 through 18. So it was really arranged depending on the session, like week to week. Loved working with the kids and taking them through the galleries and just hearing what they observed and what they took away from it. But it's such an amazing role, and it's something that I knew I probably wouldn't do full time, but enjoyed it while I did it. I did this role at the Brooklyn Museum. It was a curatorial research intern in the Asian Arts department, and that was really amazing, both because it was a subject matter I was really interested in. At that time, the Brooklyn Museum had closed its Asian Arts wing for renovation, and so everything was off view, and it was an opportunity for the museum to kind of consolidate kind of records of what they had in the gallery and beef up kind of their tombstones and kind of just fact check a lot of things. So I got to do a ton of research on the different types of art of Asia that the Brooklyn Museum had, mostly Indian art, and go through records, read personal accounts of the collectors that donated that art to the museum. In some cases, researching the provenance of the art, which is kind of the history of who has had ownership of this piece of art through the time that it's been in circulation. I think this is a topic that's really hot right now, making sure that the provenance of artworks in institutions kind of checks out.
Did you hear that the Met now opened up its own department for provenance?
Really?
Yeah.
Like
I read
anyone can research?
No. They actually like have, they started like they gave the role to a dedicated person who's now going to like check the provenance of like all the works in their collection and incoming works and things like that. But I feel like just that role in itself didn't exist at the Met before.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's a new thing that museums are focusing on. And I think it's a really good thing. So I know for Nepal and I think also India, those countries passed a law that any art that's kind of antiquity, like older art, couldn't be like taken out of the country after 1950 or sometime around then. Yeah. Because there's this problem of looters, so people who will steal artwork that is either kind of out at a historic site or in someone's home, and to sell it kind of internationally, kind of on the illegally.
Let's be honest.
And then they end up in these museums, and I think it's definitely the museum's job to kind of be realistic about their collection. Not that, I think it's kind of a question like, should we have this art here in the U.S. in museums, or I think, just being a little bit more clear-eyed about, okay, we don't actually know where this came from. We don't have records. They've been lost. And so just making sure that someone's not looking for this. That wasn't acquired by kind of ill means.
Let's be honest. I feel like a lot of museum, especially older objects and things that have come from outside of the country have very shaky provenance at best.
Yeah. So again, I was an intern, so it wasn't my kind of like expert opinion, but I was kind of looking into just like, let's see if we can track how far back we have records for where this object came from in the collection. which I thought was really interesting. So I've been following kind of the recent news on
Yeah,
that
no,
topic.
it's I feel like it's also, like you mentioned, really important conversation, especially around now, because I feel like museums are taking active roles in really doing this research. And, there's always that ongoing case with the British Museum and the Elgin marbles that I feel like will never end. But, it's really important for museums to know the history of every object in their collection, not only for research, but to make sure that it was acquired by, appropriate means. And if it wasn't, then, maybe let's have a conversation about how it should be returned to where it came from.
Exactly. Yeah. So in the end, that internship was something that I was really interested in. Just, I think a lot of topics came up that I was personally interested in. But again, wasn't really sure how to kind of turn that into a full-time working position. But
so during these internships, were you also looking for full-time work? So were these internship when we were doing these internships, were you thinking maybe this will lead into a full-time job, or were you kind of just taking these internships just to, kind of feel out what you might want to do?
A little bit of both. Of course, I did most of these while I was still in school, so I, of course, still had to graduate. But I think I was just trying to put out feelers both of what I wanted to do, but also once kind of in the institution, just ask questions like, what does this look like for someone who has gotten their BA? How do they kind of move on from here and work here? And yeah, a lot of times it would be just more school and kind of realistic kind of take on, and after you get your schooling, you may still just have to be flexible about where you get to work. So there's no kind of guarantee that there'll be positions open at the time that you graduate. So it's a lot of it is timing and luck. And yeah, just being flexible.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, especially if you're like doing an internship for a bigger museum, obviously you're not going to be able to move forward. Even let's say you've graduated, now you're doing an internship and you're hoping for a permanent position. That's never guaranteed until a position becomes open. And to be fair, a lot of positions in museums very rarely become open, especially for somebody with very minimal experience at an internship level. Usually, they'll do like a professional search for people in the field before they would hire somebody from an internship.
Right. And there's so many qualified people too, so that's not to say that once you've been an intern, you're the best candidate either.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's just the realistic take. So there's so many people who have done amazing work in their graduate studies that absolutely should be considered for those.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. So after your internships, you ended up at oh my goodness, as an image assistant at the Davidson Art Center.
Yes, that's the gallery at Wesleyan University.
Okay.
So they were digitizing their prints collection. Wesleyan has a really robust collection of prints. So that was focusing on British and American prints from the 18th and 19th centuries. And it was so funny because it was the summer, but we were in this like very air-conditioned kind of black room.
Okay.
Taking photographs all day of these prints. But yeah, a cool experience. Getting to see all of this material that we had in the collection. I think a lot of classes do take you to the Davidson Art Center to look at prints, but it kind of made me realize, maybe I should just make an appointment and just see what's here. Because prints, light sensitivity, they're not kept out all the time. So you really have to kind of seek it out and set up a visit. But yeah, it was a great summer job. That one was paid.
Okay, good. Good. I'm glad to hear it. And then I know that you also, can we talk a little bit about your experience in the European Decorative Arts internship at Wadsworth Atheneum?
Yeah, that was a great experience too. So that one, the internship was geared towards preparing for an exhibition that they held in 2017. It was an exhibition focusing on the collector J.P. Morgan, who also is the very famous financier.
Yes, of course.
So he amassed a massive collection of art from Europe throughout the ages, and watches. And I mean, this man just collected so much. And so it's actually, as a New Yorker, it's very interesting to see after he died, his son dispersed his collection between primarily the Frick collection, the Met, the Morgan Library, and Wadsworth Atheneum. So we were basically researching artworks in those different institutions since it had been dispersed there, and trying to primarily identify. So I'll back up. So what my internship was mostly focusing on was he had this London residence. It was like 2 apartments back, like that he combined into one, so huge space that had all these different themed rooms, and we have inventory lists of what artworks he had in those rooms, and also I think a friend's daughter of his painted watercolor paintings of his house. So it was almost like a puzzle. It was matching what we saw in the inventory lists. It would be like 3 French porcelain vases, and then you'd look at the watercolor, which is not a photograph, but it does capture some likenesses of what he might have had. And then searching through the archives of the Frick and the Wadsworth Atheneum to try and piece together what was what for the exhibition. So it was like a scavenger hunt, and it was really, really fun. And so the exhibition happened in 2017, about maybe almost a year after I worked on the show. But it taught me a lot. Like the really famous the Fragonard room in the Frick was actually in his London house.
Oh,
like,
wow.
That was his at one point. So like, just putting together kind of what I've seen just as like a New York person going to museums. I'm like, oh, he had that. So it was kind of interesting to think kind of the journey of where these artworks had started.
Every time I go to, I love the Frick because one of my favorite painters is Vermeer, and they have those beautiful Vermeers. Yeah. But I always think, I'm like, people like JP Morgan and, Rockefeller and all these like older tycoon wealthy men who had these collections, what it would have been like to live in a house with all these masterpieces on your walls that now we only experience in a museum.
Right. Well, I think the Frick collection is a really great example of that. Yeah. Once it reopens at its original home. It's just almost like a jewel box. You're living with all of these incredible works of art. I'll also say the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston is very similar. So they're not, of course, affiliated with JP Morgan, but a similar kind of very wealthy collector who made their home just almost like a kaleidoscope of different art.
They were essentially living in museums.
In museums, yeah.
It must have been amazing.
Amazing and stressful.
Yeah. Although I don't know if they really worried that much about conservation back in those days. Yeah.
I think Isabella Stewart Gardner, she threw like these parties, and you'd just be with putting your cocktail glass down on like this priceless like credenza. I don't know. Yeah.
No, now I like, if I buy anything and like goes on the wall, I like check on it every 3 seconds to make sure that it's like in the pristine condition that I got it from. I think
sounds like a fun time. Wish I was there.
Yeah, I know. So I feel like people now who live with are a bunch more cautious than I feel like they were back in the day.
Yeah.
Just parlors with smoke and all this stuff going on.
Yeah.
But okay, so then you went on to become the research assistant and community manager at Richard Atias and Associates. Was that your first like full-time job out of school?
Yes. Kind of professional job.
Yes.
That was the job that I took to kind of get to New York. And again, it was kind of an international event planning company. And I think it was an opportunity to come here and kind of get settled, and B, to kind of feel things out and decide if art was going to be a really passionate hobby of mine, or if I really felt strongly that I wanted it to be my professional goal as well. So again, just kind of feeling things out. So I'd say, like things aren't super linear. Yeah. You don't always kind of head straight towards where you are now. But I think it was helpful because I just really wanted to have working experience. Yeah. And that fulfilled that for me.
I mean, tell me about it. I mean, throughout my 20s, my resume looks like I was just like everywhere and nowhere because I was just trying to figure out what I wanted to do and where I felt like I fit and could make, the sort of differences that I wanted to make. So it's okay to, go around, experiment, see what works for you, what doesn't. If, you're fortunate enough to have that sort of path for yourself.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so I wanted to ask you, what do you think some of the biggest challenges were for you along the way professionally?
Yeah, I think I mentioned it kind of in our conversation, but I was really eager to be out there and working, and I think there was a lot of uncertainty of like what that would look like, even though it was crazy. I had all these kind of experiences in museums, kind of assisting with working folks, but I didn't really know how to get myself in there as a full-time role. So I think once I had kind of learned that galleries and kind of commercial art was a whole world that I had not explored, things opened up a lot for me. So I think what helped was just talking with people already working and asking them how they got where they were. But yeah, I think it was just kind of the uncertainty of like, what is there that I can do with this? Because I'm really passionate. I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
But it wasn't clear where to go.
Yeah. So what sort of advice would you say you could give to, let's say, maybe women in the field who might want to end up where you are now, or, people who are maybe struggling with trying to figure out where they want to be? What do you think would be the best piece of advice that you could give them from the experience that you've gathered?
Yeah, I think the most helpful thing for me was talking with folks in the industry. That can be kind of hard, depending on kind of where you're at in life. Like I think I'm lucky that through my university, there was just kind of a network of a few folks in New York who are at different institutions. I talked to an alumnus who was at MoMA and asked her about her career, and a couple of people at different commercial galleries. So again, just reaching out to people that you see maybe doing jobs that you're interested in, or you could see yourself trying, and talking to them about how they got where they were. At the same time, I'll also say just be very purposeful when you do that. People are really busy, and I think a lot of people want to help, but they don't know how to help.
Yeah.
So when reaching out, being as specific as possible, saying something like, I'm really interested in commercial galleries in New York City. I see you're working at a commercial gallery. Can I ask you like how you got here? Instead of just saying like, I'm interested in the arts. Can you tell me more? Because people want to help. They just don't know how to help you. And then you can always offer, this maybe less so if it's just informational coffee, but like if you are in a position at a company and you want to kind of move forward, I think also offering how you can help, both it shows that you're interested, and you can help someone out with what they're working on. Maybe they do have extra work that they can't manage and are happy to bring someone in to assist. But it shows that you're not just kind of asking for advice and then saying, okay, bye.
Yeah.
It shows you're invested and like you kind of want to do an exchange of information. I think people like to see that too.
So I like to ask my sitters, if they don't mention it during the talk, why they got into the field of art. A lot of them either had parents already in the art field, or it was just like a calling that, they felt like deep inside themselves. Why did you pursue the art field?
Yeah, that's such a big question. And I've done a lot of soul searching, saying, why am I doing this?
I think we all have at one point or another.
I'll say I think it comes from, I've always loved making art. I wish I had like an aha moment that I remember. But I think it comes from, maybe my aha moment was, I remember when I was really, really young, like in preschool, there was like one art easel in the classroom, and I guess I was just hogging it the whole day. Like I wouldn't let anyone else use it. So I guess, yeah, I really liked making art. My parents work in an office. They're not in the arts, but they were also extremely encouraging of me, and I'm so thankful that they were. Living near Boston, we went to museums, and so I think I did get exposed to seeing art from a young age, and I think they greatly appreciate it, but not many artists in my family, so kind of was finding my own way. But I think through making art, it's incredibly it's an amazing experience to make, because it really, for me, it kind of turns your brain off, and you just kind of work in this really fluid mode, and it's just a really cool, when you're really like inspired and you're working and you're just intuitively putting things together and in kind of this flow, it's really an amazing place to be. And then just being inspired by other artists, I think it changes how you see things. Like I think of art that I've seen all the time, and just like if I'm walking around and I see something, like, oh, that looks like something I've seen before, and then it just like is a really fun way to kind of inform how you see the world. And I think that's what's so great about art, is that it's so human. It makes us think about ourselves and our world, and makes us introspective and also curious about what's outside of us. So I think both of those things just made me really passionate about going to see more art, and just like it was absorbing as much as I can. And I think I've kept that to this day, just being just really curious and always wanting to learn more. And yeah, I think just being open to that was really important. Even though I don't make art full time, I still try and tinker when I can. It's hard with a full-time job, but people do it. And also being open to kind of what types of art I'm interested in. Like I didn't know I was going to end up in contemporary and modern art, because I think I went through a phase. You go through different phases of discovery. So when I was younger, I didn't really get it, and now I feel like I'm learning so much through working at Pace. And in the past, I was really fascinated with miniature paintings from India. That's kind of what informed a lot of my college studies. And I also was able to study there for a semester, and actually I worked with a contemporary painter who's working in the traditional miniaturist style, and actually got to work under him and learn the traditional techniques and make some of my own paintings. So just being super curious and like following what you're interested in has kind of led me here. But even though I've gone through many different phases, and it's okay to kind of roll with what you're interested in at the time, or what opportunities you have at the time.
You know what's interesting? Because you said that. I was, and still am, super obsessed with the Golden Age, the Flemish Renaissance. And I was like, this is what I'm going to do. That's why I said I love the Frick. But I was like, this is what I'm going to do. This is going to be it for me. And then somehow I ended up in contemporary and modern art. And I'm like, how did I get from this to this? Like sometimes I look back and I'm just like, how did this happen for me?
Yeah, you look back and you're like, I have no idea how I got from point A to point B. Do you feel like you can bring any of that interest or that knowledge to your current job? Like, do you see kind of echoes of that?
I think what I see is, I think what I really loved about like the paintings from the Flemish Renaissance was how detailed they were, and how you had to really look to the symbolism in the paintings to read them. And I feel like I bring that sort of study now into the way that I view contemporary and modern art, and specifically why I lean more towards conceptual art and contemporary and modern arts. I feel like there's that kind of layover there. But still, one of my favorite museums in the world that I visit as much as possible is the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, obviously.
Okay, we'll definitely have to talk. I'm going there next for the first time. And I'm so excited.
Yeah. So you know the Blockbuster exhibition that they had on Vermeer, I think it was last year? I was like, the second the tickets went live, I was like, I'm there. And I planned my whole vacation around just seeing that exhibition.
Oh my gosh. I'm so jealous. That must have been incredible.
Oh my God. It was a lifetime experience. Because my bucket list is... I've wanted to see every Vermeer possible. And I hadn't. up until, they had I think I have like one or two more paintings that I have to see live because they weren't part of the show. But that just like cut down on my time on the bucket list. And I remember I wanted to see the girl with the pearl earring, which is in Den Haag normally. And when I was in Den Haag, I was like, okay, great. I went to the museum and they're like, oh, she's currently on loan traveling.
No.
And it was the first time I actually got to see her was when she came to the Frick.
That's when I saw her too.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I was like, it took me so long to see you, but here you finally are. And it was the Frick in New York.
I mean, sometimes I'm sure that must have been so devastating in the moment, but what a story. I mean,
I know.
These things are treasures, and it's kind of also about how do you get to see them? Like
exactly.
The journey too.
Yeah. And it's so incredible. Sometimes I'm like at a museum and then like I remember seeing the artwork in the book and I'm like, this looks completely different live than it did in the textbook that I had in school. So that's why, we had that conversation about seeing art in person and, what a different experience it is than seeing it online or in a textbook. So I really encourage people to really go out and see and experience art. Yeah.
And spend some time with it.
Yeah.
Because you'll notice things if you just if you're not in a rush.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm fortunate enough to, obviously I'm not a huge collector because I have a budget, but like I'm fortunate enough to, be able to acquire some pieces when I can. And really living with an artwork, I have to say, you see it so differently over time than from the initial moment that it like came to you. Like you notice the smallest details or like your feelings around it change depending on the life experiences that you have. And I feel like it's such a special opportunity to be able to have that in life.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah. Like I think that's a big part of it is these things are, even if they stay static, we don't. So
exactly
how we change in our day-to-day lives might influence how we think about a certain piece of art, and you can always come back to it after years and just notice how things have changed.
Yeah, I think that's really that's the incredible magic of art.
Definitely.
Well, thank you for being here. I do want to get to our fire round question. Maybe we have time for one or two questions.
Okay.
So I will ask you to pick a number between 1 and 10, and then I'll read the corresponding question to you. Ready?
Okay. Let's try a 6.
6. Okay. What is a piece of art that you own that you would never sell, or one that is your favorite?
Oh, wow. It might be one of so I too have a budget and I'm kind of a baby collector.
Yes.
But try to when I can. And I'd say maybe one of my first acquisitions. It's a gouache on paper painting by Maud Desollier, who's a Canadian artist. And she was participating in a fundraiser sale during COVID. And I think both kind of the time that I purchased it, kind of the context of it, and also how long I've had it, and as you say, like lived with it.
Yeah.
It's really bright, it's abstract, but lots of kind of geometric shapes, really dynamic, like there's a lot of movement in it, and so I think that one just has a special place for me.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's, what's interesting actually during COVID, I feel like a lot of artists did, like these projects or they released prints for, fundraisers, and things like that. And I ended up acquiring like probably the most artworks that I ever have was during COVID because, artists were doing these like special editions that were, on the cheaper side, that I normally wouldn't be able to afford. So that was,
I honestly wish I had gotten more because there's so many artists that I admire who were putting out work, and so it was a very unique time.
Yeah. Okay, one more.
8.
What's a book you read that you didn't want to end?
Oh wow. I don't know. I'm drawing a blank.
Or maybe a book that you really enjoy or reread.
Yeah. It's been a number of years, but I've been meaning to reread it. There's a novel, The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt, which again overlaps with art. So,
No, it's such a good book.
it is a very long book, especially there's a part where they're in Nevada and it's just this very desolate part of the book. But I remember really enjoying that book, and I lent it to someone, and now the copy has disappeared. So
No.
it's on my list to get it back. But yeah, I feel like it's like TV. Sometimes you read and then it's like out of mind.
Yes.
So yeah, but this summer I think I've got my reading list.
Yeah, the summertime is a great time to catch up on reading, because I feel like we work in the art world. So, the rest of the year for us is super hectic and busy. And summertime is like that time where we have, a little bit room to breathe.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's a good time to catch up on some reading.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for being here. And we had such a lovely conversation. So thank you so much for sharing your journey and your experience and your advice with listeners. And for anybody who would love to connect with Sarah, just keep me posted. Send me an email or a DM, whatever works. I would love to, put women in touch with each other to see, where we can help along the way. But thank you. And I hope to see my listeners back next week. Bye.